Hi, my name is Sam Cassatt. For the last 5 years, I have been Chief Strategy Officer of a company called Consensus. Does anyone know that company? Does anyone know Ethereum? So what Consensus was conceived to do was basically to seed, to build, to fund, to develop the paradigms that birthed Ethereum as a business prospect into the world. I think we've been fairly successful in doing that, and now, after 5 years of doing that, I'm here to announce a new project. Could you go to the next slide? It's called Aligned Capital, and when I say aligned, I mean aligned with many things, aligned with the future of humanity, aligned with hopefully the people in this room, and also aligned with a general mission and goal of what this venture capital firm will do, which is to invest in the core technologies of things that are revolutionary to institutions in our world. And so I would contend that market gaps in institutions and their subsequent reformation is the primary way that humans evolve as our species. Right? We don't really evolve physically that much anymore, a little bit. I'm sure there are some scientists here who could opine on that. But I would contend the major way that we do that is a feedback loop between us, our desires, our goals, and the institutions that surround us and serve us. And when they no longer do that, to the best of their ability in a way that reflects what's available now, the best technology, the best thoughts, those things need to be deconstructed and reconstructed. That could be the French Revolution, that could be blockchain technology disrupting the way that we do business at a very large scale, revolutionizing the rails underneath the economy, and the lights come up for me, so thanks. And so I think there are three major institutions that we can do that with that are obvious to me. One is the global financial system. One is the healthcare system and the mental health care system. Right now, the way that we treat mental health is obviously revolutionized by a lot of the people in this room. There are novel compounds coming on the market that are going to be an order of magnitude better than what's available now. And finally, the relationship between AI and algorithms and our society and how we behave online, the existing institutions are really not prepared to deal with that. Facebook and YouTube algorithms are a very simple AI, and they're already changing our elections, they're changing our emotions. They're not really suited to what is most serving us as humans. So we're going to talk about that actually a little bit on this panel or duet here. I invite you all to check out my Twitter, Sam Cassatt, align.capital, or email me at info@align.capital, and let's get aligned towards the future of humanity and evolving our species. So thank you very much. I'll be right back.
All right, Okay, so I would like to invite Raina Kumra up to the stage. And these two people are dear friends of mine. You guys can go ahead and have a seat. And I asked them to come because they both have a very unique perspective on data privacy, ethics, and sovereignty. And Raina's done some amazing work and created tools for people around the world. And then Sam's point of view on blockchain and what you can do with that. So they're going to have a dynamic conversation on ethics, privacy, data sovereignty. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi. Well, congratulations on the launch.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited about it.
So I think we are supposed to talk about data ethics and sovereignty, and I also like to talk about practical things that we can all do. I know we had only a few minutes to powwow before, but we wanted to focus the conversation around a couple of key areas and a couple of key actors in how to transform the way we use ethics and technology across every lever. So investment being one of the most important ones.
Yep. Users, an important one.
And the makers, obviously, which is why we're talking to you guys.
I'd like to maybe offer a little bit of framing of how I think about data sovereignty and privacy. And what I mean when I say data sovereignty, I probably mean something that's a little bit valence from my experience in blockchain technology, because a lot of people are saying that blockchain has the potential to revolutionize the way we treat personal data. I think that's true. I don't know if we've quite gotten there yet, but just without going too much into it, the reason why we have Facebook and Google, or part of the reason why we have that, them sucking up all of our data, is because of a failure in the way we design the internet, right? So originally, when it was ARPANET, you logged onto your university's computer, you had a username there. Everyone actually knew your real identity because you had to work at a university or be a student there. And so we never really thought about that much. And what we ended up co-opting is email, and then what we eventually ended up co-opting to use as your identity is Facebook and Google. Every time you click login with Facebook or log in with Google, that means that that sort of core of your identity, the thing that is you to everyone else on the internet, is owned by them. And all the data that gets hung off of that identifier is owned by them. So right now, we're at a place where, by default, pretty much Facebook and Google get all of that information about you. Blockchain is an opportunity to reimagine that dynamic and give you a new marker that identifies you, and there are a bunch of cool companies doing that right now. But I think one of the reasons why it's so pertinent to this discussion is because imagine if your brainwaves and your biosignals and the contents of your emotions and the contents of your mind is owned by Google and Facebook. That's even more dystopian than what we have right now. So it's especially pertinent to this context here.
So for users, what are the key missing things that you think we need to talk about more, especially in relation to, I just purchased this device, it's telling me about my heart rate, it's not really threatening in any way. How do you tie the dystopian future, or the dystopian present, let's be honest, with the data collection that's happening that people don't realize because it feels so innocent and non-harming?
Yeah, I mean, so I do think, one, just being aware of it is really important, right? And if you look at, there are some minor steps that have been taken to deal with this problem. So Apple is actually pretty on the forefront of at least the mainstream consumer version of things. So log in with Apple uses a different identifier for each thing you log into. Apple Health Kit is also a way to store data in a way that they by policy will not share with other corporations. They won't sell the data, et cetera. And so those are sort of baby steps. There was actually a cool company that saw that I was speaking here. Actually, it's a project, and they reached out to me on Twitter yesterday and told me they were at the Waterloo hackathon. This is an Ethereum hackathon, and they had used a technology called Enigma, which is basically a way that you can put something on the cloud or on the blockchain. You can do computation on that data without ever revealing the data itself. So I can say, cool company in the exhibition hall, you can have my data, explicitly give you access to it, but no one else automatically gets that. They can't later sell it because I control access to it. So I think just being aware of the fact that you're getting your data sold to everyone every time you log in with Facebook, that's one thing, but I don't know, what do you think?
I've seen some interesting models in the healthcare space where, and it's good because it's already regulated, so we should be looking more towards the healthcare space and how data is treated. But one model is if you participate in a clinical trial, you get to keep your data and you get to lease it out to different pharma companies who want to access your data. So every time your data is accessed, you get some sort of compensation versus getting money for being part of the clinical trial once, and then that data goes on to generate billions of dollars without you having any participation in that. So that's one model I think is really interesting. How it could be applied to social media technology and consumer tech remains to be seen, but we need to start flexing our imagination around models like that.
I think it's a really difficult problem though, right? Because people have been thinking about this a while. There's the Open Identity Foundation, I believe is what it's called. A guy named Drummond Reed who pioneered a lot of these ideas. Ken, who's sitting right there, I think pioneered some of these ideas too. And for the most part, it hasn't caught on, right? Like the OpenID was piloted by Yahoo maybe a decade ago. It never really caught on. I think they removed it a few years ago. And so, Facebook Connect was the first thing that really caught on with logging with Facebook. And the idea, there's something called OIX, the Open Interchange Identity something. OIX was an attempt to do the same thing where you could be paid for micro transactions for your own data. It hasn't been realized yet, and I think part of it is, the calculated value of like a Facebook profile is something like $40, $50, something like that. So
I think it's more,
it's,
given the market cap, sure.
so who knows? Yeah, I mean, who knows how they estimate that? But the practical value and actually delivering that value in a way that overcomes the amount of friction to do it. I don't know if anyone solved it yet. I know there are a lot of people, especially in the blockchain world, working on that. Companies like Uport and 3Box doing pretty well on that. Both consensus companies.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a difficult problem.
Yeah, very. But the nice thing about consumer technology and social media technology is we have never stopped innovating on it. I don't think we're done yet. So I'm really excited about what I see at the fringes coming in and hopefully taking over. We can all hope for that. I see it as 3 levers in how to instill ethics into product creation and deployment, and it really starts with the team itself and this understanding. And there's sort of this reflex of like, oh, okay, yeah, we need a tech ethicist, or we need a chief tech ethics officer, or something like that, versus just taking it on ourselves. When we're creating products, to think about what are the first and second order consequences that a product change or a product itself or a service could bring. It's something we're not that good at as humans, but it is something that we can learn, and it's something I also have worked on this thing called the Ethical OS while I was at Omidyar Network, and it provides a checklist, basically the same sort of checklist that a surgeon might use in the ER. It's saving lives in maybe a more abstract way. So that's one sort of lever area, and then the other one that I've been looking at is investment. Because if the investors aren't asking the right questions of the companies, and especially the ones that are coming up with the right ideas, we're not going to get anywhere. So it's really like a funding plus a personal responsibility. And then, of course, there's boards who do very little of their job in what is essentially regulating the ethics, and as they should. I feel like tech company boards get away with doing as little as possible on this. And they could be flexing their muscles more on this as well.
So to go a little bit abstract, and this, I'll say something about investing. One of the pillars that I will be investing in through Align Capital is AI and humans, or the intersection of artificial intelligence or technology generally in our society. We talked a little bit about Facebook having your data, your health data, your behavior data, et cetera, and that's already dystopian and scary sometimes. But I want to go out on a limb a little bit conceptually and just say, you could think about these algorithms as an artificial intelligence that is already interacting with you, right? And I'm sure some of you saw the news stories maybe a year or two ago where it was revealed that, without any IRB review or whatever, Facebook's data science teams are conducting experiments on people to make them depressed or make them happy or whatever. And I guarantee somewhere in the data science teams, they've got an algorithm that makes you the most addicted possible, the one that makes you the most depressed, the one that makes you most happy. And for them, their business model is, we will addict you to the screen. You get a dopamine rush every time you flip through the next post, and we'll insert some stuff that will sell you, and we'll sell that opportunity to other people. And that's fine, but I don't think those boards anytime soon are going to make the decision not to do that, because that is their business model. And so what is the solution to that? So, well, stepping back, I think just acknowledging, for one, that this is a simple artificial intelligence that is manipulating our society, right? It's manipulating elections, it's manipulating your emotions, it's causing filter bubbles, it's causing people to think or not think certain things. It can exacerbate fake news, deep fakes, things like that. So it actually has a feedback loop already with us, and so we're actually interacting with an intelligence. And that intelligence is designed by a certain business model. And so what would it mean to really counter that? One of the things that I would impress upon any AI company that I would interact with or invest in is that you need to start thinking about, is there a market gap, I think there is one, for artificial intelligence that is aligned with human beings, right? There's a whole field called AI alignment, right? Does it have the same goals as us? Maybe I would pay, actually, for a separate artificial intelligence that was different than Facebook's.
So would I, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that might be one of the routes by which we can start to solve that problem, get aligned.
Yeah, I know the Wikimedia founder, Jimmy Wales, has a new social network that you pay $13 a year for. There's a free version coming out. It's very early. I mean, it looks like Newsnet, very early days of small groups talking about different things, the way the internet kind of used to be. But yeah, and there's got to be a way to opt out of being manipulated every day. And what we know for sure at this point, what this model surfaces is the lowest quality content and misinformation. And there's very, very little line between the content and the advertising, as opposed to broadcast, where we actually have laws about how we would use advertising, political advertising, truth, not truth. It would always be contextualized as an ad, except for infomercials, but most of us can figure that part out. So yeah, I think as an angel investor, I always ask the questions. I recently completed an investment in a training tool for gamers, and I had a lot of ethical quandaries for them to kind of work their way through, a lot of problems that I presented them with, just to help them flex out through scenarios of where their software could be used for something that was really, really bad, the negative side of what the positive that they're trying to influence. And they came back with really thoughtful answers, which is why I ended up investing, because I wanted these guys to be working in the field and winning in the field that is, continuing to grow. Esports is incredibly huge and will continue to be a part of our lives and a part of our children's lives. And I wanted people who have an ethical backbone working in it and winning and defining, that next platform. So I, put them through a diligence checklist. I can share some of that as well. And that was great. And the other thing that I've been doing with my investments is, because diversity continues to be the reason why we end up with, so many biased algorithms, and getting folks to really look at their teams and make room for the folks that are not yet on their teams, even though they are looking for them and they haven't found them yet. So working through cultural issues in order to think more broadly than the 3 people that are founding the company. So those things have been really successful in just asking the right questions and giving some simple structure to follow. It's not rocket science to be ethical.
So I want to go in another weird direction. So one of the theses of what I'm investing into is basically that, and it fits in with data sovereignty, right? So when we say data sovereignty, we're saying that you control your data, you store it, or at least you control it, how it's stored, and who gets to access it. As our economy has progressed, and it sounds almost cliche to say, but as we move into an information economy, I think we've just begun that, right? Mm-hmm. The stuff that we buy, the stuff that we want and provides value to us, used to be mostly, even 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 2008, the top 5 market cap United States companies were all companies, with the exception of one, I think Microsoft, that produce physical goods. as of 2018, 10 years later, most of the top 5, except one, I believe, is also producers of software, right? And there are reasons for that. Software is infinitely scalable. WhatsApp had 35 engineers at the time when they were sold to Facebook, serving 450 million customers. They had 900 million customers and 50 engineers in 2015, a couple years later. And so the idea being, things made out of information can scale almost infinitely. Things made out of information also are very, very difficult to control. Every time our current systematic paradigm of regulation, of the institutions around what things can spread and what can't, every time it's tried to control that, it's failed. So in the 90s, early 2000s, we had the DCSS algorithm, which allowed DVDs to be decrypted. People were getting prosecuted just for linking to it on a website for a piece of information. The RSA algorithm was classified as a munition, and you couldn't export it. And people printed both those things on T-shirts and said, okay, is this a munition? Is this T-shirt a munition? I don't think so, especially not in the United States, where you can say whatever you want legally. So cryptocurrency is also a piece of information. It happens to be a thing of value, but it also acts like a piece of information. And every time we've tried to stop that, and BitTorrent as well, and Napster, eventually they got tired of putting grandmothers with $300,000 fines for their grandchildren downloading songs on BitTorrent, and we stopped that too. So like every time we've tried to regulate something that looks like information, we've failed. There's just a fundamental mismatch to it. So my question would be, I don't know the answer necessarily, but is if we have data sovereignty, and therefore we have sovereignty over things made out of information that now are the most valuable things or some of the most valuable things in the world, what does that do to the shape of our society? What does that do to the shape of regulatory regimes, to countries, to nation states? I think we're just beginning to understand that, and I think it's going to get a little more wild.
Yeah, there are, that's super interesting, and I think there's models to follow in property rights that people have been talking about applying in the same way. So at least, we're not starting from scratch. We've done this before. We have figured things out, all the way from dangerous technology like nuclear bomb and how we, mitigate harms on that. I think we can do the same here. And I don't know if we can pull up the slides from the Ethical OS. I don't know if they have them, but I can show you a few really simple things that you could do today when that comes up. But in the meantime, anything else?
I think that covers it. Thanks for listening to my crazy predictions of the future. I think it's going to get heated, and data sovereignty is going to be a huge issue.
Yeah, I love it. It should be.
I want to shout out, you should look up that company from Waterloo Hackathon. It's called UFlow, using blockchain to preserve your data. Seems like a really cool team. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so we got the slides. So the checklist is really just a series of questions, like a normal checklist is, like, have you done XYZ? Have you thought about XYZ before you finish development? And then I also have a before you ship checklist. So, I mean, have you eliminated dark patterns in your UX? Like, this seems like a good question to ask, but a lot of times you end up designing for not the user, you end up designing for the business model, and the business model is not always aligned with the user. Have you read your terms of service, and would you be able to explain it to your mother or a 5-year-old? Because if you can't, you should probably go rewrite it because it's not transparent. Can you go to the next slide, please? And this is the before you ship. A lot of things around AI, data, bias, you really want to think through. And I'm happy to make this available for anyone as well. But have you gut checked yourself on implicit assumptions? Because that's a great thing to ask before you ship out a product. And have you thought about how this is going to play out in a year or two in a new regulatory environment, in a new political environment? If you're taking user-generated content, there's some really good lessons to learn recently from Facebook about that. And is that really the route you want to go? Or do you want to try to improve your product and improve society and create something that's actually contributing to our health versus addictive technologies? And then if you just go to the next slide, these are the general risk zones. This is my wheel of fortune. But these are things to think about with any product. Not all of them are going to hit, but hateful and criminal actors, surveillance states, disinformation and propaganda, addiction and the dopamine economy, these are all things that you need to just walk your product through and understand what would happen if. And this doesn't have to be a Black Mirror scenario. It can be as small as just harming one user, or just harming one user's chance for a job, or just harming one user's ability to vote clearly. So those are just all things to think about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.